Good
Oops.
morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. I am Amy from Team Cultivator. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Agtech panel, SK's Unfair Advantage, taking Agtech to new heights. So this panel will cover all things Agtech and discuss how technology is driving global agriculture forward. We will hear from Agtech industry leaders, Tanner Folk, CEO of IntraGrain. Tanner hails from the booming metropolis that is Holdfast, Saskatchewan, population 200. He has gone from, and I'm assuming, underpaid farmhand at the Folk family farm to CEO of an ag tech company that has been acquired by the conglomerate that is Calian. Next, we'll have Wilson Actin. He is the Chief Growth Officer at VergeAg. He is a four-time tech startup founder based in Calgary, but his family used to run a ranch at the equally booming Saskatchewan metropolis that is the big muddy area. Surprisingly enough, Holdfast for sure has them beat in population count. And lastly, but certainly not least, we have Kim Nicholson, VP of Ag Tech and Innovation at the Mosaic Company. Kim is coming to us from just outside of Atlanta, Georgia, with 35 years of experience in the tech and ag tech industries. So Tanner, Kim, and Wilson each bring a really unique perspective and knowledge base, which is sure to bring the fire, or more preferably in the ag world, the rain, in this interactive session that will be diving deep into the innovation and exciting world of ag tech. So this booming global industry with a lot of investment and new noise that is happening right here in Saskatchewan. So throughout, please be sure to drop any questions that you have and we will get them to our Rockstar panel. And with that, I'm going to disappear into the background and I'm going to toss the mic over to my good friend, Tanner Folk.
Thanks, Amy. I'll give you a reluctant chuckle at your rain joke only because we're just coming out of the tail end of a drought. So I appreciate the position of that humor. Yeah, thanks for the intro though. Looking forward to this next kind of half hour, getting to connect with Wilson and Kim. I think we'll dive right into the pool that is ag tech by maybe kind of coloring a little bit of our experience and sort of how we've gotten into or how we've found ourselves in the position that we're in ag tech. So Wilson, let's get you to start it off. How did you find yourself in the deep end of ag tech?
For sure, it's a bit of a winding journey, although I think kind of everybody's is one way or another. As Amy mentioned, I'm originally from southern Saskatchewan. I grew up in the Moose Jaw area, and we ran cows down the Big Muddy and grain farmed around Moose Jaw. And went off on a journey of mergers and acquisitions and capital raising and corporate finance and all sorts of fun stuff. Before getting back into the entrepreneurial roots and in particular into the technology space with a group of individuals. And so it became actually a really interesting, confluence of factors coming together, being able to bring my background and my passion for agriculture. My first degree is in agriculture. It's, always where I've strove to be, and combine that with my mergers and acquisitions and business spirit and the technology side. So it just kind of sometimes stuff aligns.
Awesome, thanks, Wilson. Kim, let's hear your story.
Sure. Well, I love this chat about the small town. I grew up in a town of 212 people. I think they changed the residence sign when I moved out as a teenager, but not in Canada, in a small rural town in farming country in Indiana. And I have a degree in agronomy from Purdue, and that launched my career into agriculture in general. But I have kind of two halves to that career. The first half was in the crop protection world. I worked for a company called American Cyanamid for a number of years until the business was sold to BASF. And then I left the big corporate world to go to a startup, and went to my first startup that was some technology out of the University of Wisconsin. Sadly, it failed, as is the fortunes of many small companies, but I was still sort of hooked on startups. And so for 10 years, I had a consultancy helping people who were bringing technology into the ag sector, primarily in the US. A couple of years ago, Mosaic found me and asked me to join them as they are on this journey to build out their soil health portfolio and collaborating and working with a number of startups. And so that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years, and excited to join the panel today and for this discussion.
Thanks, Kim. I think that listening to you guys describe your story, I probably should have gone first rather than trying to follow those two acts. My story is similar, small town roots, as Amy mentioned, farming family, and I kind of, in a typical Saskatchewan farming family, you kind of have two options. You go the traditional agriculture route, or you go the route that I went. I wanted to work on the equipment. That was where my interest lied. So I spent the better part of a decade chasing that passion, and eventually found my way back into the family company, IntraGrain, and we've since been acquired by a publicly traded organization out of Ottawa named Callion Group. And but that's kind of my short elevator pitch story about how I found myself back in the world of ag tech. It's got a pull to it, right? It seems to drag us all back, even if we try to find our way into other avenues. So no, I really appreciate you guys sharing your stories. I think we'll jump right into the questions here then, I guess. So, I mean, ag tech's garnered a lot of attention in the headlines lately. Seems to be the main topic that everybody's discussing. So with the growing interest and the focus in the space really kind of worldwide today, I kind of want to dive into the differences that we're seeing between a typical business to business approach and like a direct to customer approach for tech companies as compared to this agriculture tech like lineage, or this line, this ag tech just division. So I don't know, let's talk, I really want to focus in on those differences, the things that we're seeing that are different compared to our the typical things we're used to seeing. So I think I'll probably take a stab at coloring this one. For us, it's we find that it's a really super personal relationship-based industry where our customers, whether they're other businesses or direct to customers, there's an expectation of a high touch point, which is kind of a difficult thing to maintain in a tech-based product or a tech-based world. And so really, you know, there's the seasonality, but we're really seeing that it's the differentiator for us is that reliance on trust and relationships. And I won't go too far into the weather because everybody knows that that's a big factor in the ag tech space. But yeah, I'd like to, I mean, Kim, I'd like to throw it your way and see what you're kind of seeing as some of the typical or non-typical differentiators.
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on a lot of them, Tanner, and I always laugh and tell my friends that, you know, there's no better industry to be in ag, because guess what? There is one global fact: we all have to eat and we all have to wear clothes. So, you know, we're the industry that facilitates those basic human needs. So I think that, you know, agriculture has such a deep and long history, and, you know, technology, I don't want to say that we miss out on technology, but I think sometimes we get forgotten in technology. But now, as the world turns its focus towards, you know, the need to produce food and produce it sustainably, and you know, the pandemic taught us all about supply chains and how food is impacted by supply chains. So all these things are converging to, I think, make ag tech front and center. But the one thing that a lot of technology folks who may not be familiar with ag do get sort of thrown for a loop on is this notion of the seasonality. You know, any kind of technology that you're going to test or prove or show its value, you do have to factor in the fact that it's a growing cycle, whether it's an animal that you're growing or a crop that you're growing. You know, there is a life cycle to that particular thing that you're trying to test. So that throws a lot of people for a loop. And yeah, it's just a little bit slower, I think, adoption. And you're right, you hit on a very important part, Tanner, that relationship piece of, you know, in some ways it's a very small interconnected industry. And so, you know, you do have to build those relationships and get into the, you know, more deeply into the needs of your final producer, because you don't have, you know, 100 million consumers that you're trying to serve. So I think those are the key differences.
Yeah, that's a great insight, Kim. It's funny, it brings up I'll do a quick story share that I've got and it's kind of related to the ag industry being a little bit left behind on that initial push into the tech space. My grandpa, I remember fondly the first time we put him into a piece of equipment that had auto steer, and we kind of sent him on his way, and he was blown away by the fact that it was early tech, right? So it was like the foam roller on the steering wheel, and we thought he'd be blown away by the fact that you could like minimize your overlap and all the efficiencies that he would see within that new tech innovation. But his biggest takeaway from it at the end of the day was that it would have been way easier for him to roll his cigarettes because he wouldn't have to have driven with his knee, and he would have been able to keep straight lines while he had those nice cigarettes. And I mean, aside from the fact that his obvious problem was smoking, he didn't even realize that there was the opportunity to solve a problem in that space. And so, yeah, I know it's kind of funny as we watch it sort of slowly, the tech world slowly creep into ag and then pick up steam and find its way into it. We're starting to really understand the problems that it can solve. So Wilson, I'll throw it to you. Sorry, I kind of stole that one away, but I'll throw it to you. What are the differences you're seeing?
No, yeah, all good. I love the story about your grandfather. You know, I remember that same foam ball roller on the side of the steering wheel. And in my case, my uncle quit using it because he said it didn't drive straight, because our, you know, big flat square fields in Moose Jaw, those early versions didn't adjust for essentially the curvature of the earth over a long enough run. And so he was actually right. He could drive straighter than GPS at that time, you know, but so it talks about the evolution that the technology's made. And I think, you know, when this conversation comes up, kind of the different ways to go to market and customer acquisition and how is ag similar or different than other marketplaces, I think the time aspect, or kind of where ag as a whole is at in its digital journey, is actually really important, because you know, a lot of the kind of farm gate direct to customer level selling that's happening in ag tech now, you know, there is an expectation on the customer's end that there's a higher touch interface. They want to shake a hand, they want to see a person, and that's not unique to Saskatchewan or Western Canada or even North America. You know, our business, we see that all over the place. But I think that's actually a function of kind of where we all are. You know, if we look for parallels in other sectors, you know, one that I often draw is kind of the, you know, enterprise management type software, ERP software. You know, in the early days, it was the same thing. It was, you know, a highly relationship-based sales cycle. You know, kind of educating and convincing people that this was a tool that was actually going to make their businesses run better. And we've seen that evolution as the industry has become more, you know, in that case, that industry has become more tech savvy and more kind of tech adopted, so to speak. And so I think we're just earlier in our journey, and there's nothing wrong with that. I actually see COVID as a big accelerator in that, because it disrupted the way that everybody buys everything, from the consumer to the farmer, and then everything in the middle, the agronomist, the grain buyer, et cetera. And it started to disintermediate that reliance on that handshake. And there's anything wrong with the handshake, but there's other ways we can do it. The flip side is, from a technology perspective, we also need to be building products that are, you know, more attuned or properly attuned to the customer. You know, truly self-serve for a product engineer is a lot different than self-serve for a farmer at Holdfast. It's just the nature of the customer that we're targeting, including, is the farmer at Holdfast a customer? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's the grain buyer in Winnipeg, and that's fine. And so it's just kind of different ways to think about, you know, who are we really targeting? What are we trying to achieve? And then, you know, be mindful of where we're also at in our journey.
Yeah, that's so good, Wilson. I mean, understanding your audience and truly understanding, solving the real problems in a way that's actually going to take that pain point away from the actual audience that you're trying to target is such a strong statement. And it's all too often overlooked in, as you say, a lot of the different industries. But we got to do our best to make sure that we direct this new thing that is ag tech in the right way early on. So, no, I love that. I really appreciate it, Wilson. I'm going to hit you again here. I want to dive a little bit into kind of like some sales strategies and sale channels for ag tech startups in particular. It can be really challenging when selling direct to farmers. So I want to know, what have you found to work? What's your guys' approach? What's your do differently's moving forward that you can maybe help relieve some pain points before people feel them when they're trying to get into this space?
Yeah, well, I guess the first part is, you know, by no means do I have this Pandora's box solved. You know, it's an ongoing and kind of constant push, which I think everybody knows. You know, a few things that, you know, I've learned both by observing others and through scar tissue is, you know, a couple of things in that, agriculture in particular seems to be more prone to, want to dive into the channel. Let's follow the channel for technology. Generally speaking, being kind of, at least in the grains space, the flow of inputs, that kind of established movement of product from, manufacturers like BASF and Bayer and others, through the agronomist and ultimately to the customer. And on paper, it sounds awesome. I only have to talk to 1,000 agronomists instead of 10,000 farmers, for example, and they've already got a trusted relationship and all those types of pieces. But on those early days, you have to be so careful, because that's also disintermediating you from your ultimate customer. And so on those early days, back to kind of when you're trying to really make sure you've got the solution, on nailing the problem on the head, you're losing that valuable customer feedback. And so, lots will tell you, well, going direct to customer is not scalable. Well, having a solution that doesn't solve a problem is less scalable than going direct to customer. So, don't be so quick to race to the channel, I guess, would be part of my advice. And then the other thing is the channel right for what you're trying to do? Everybody else is trying to go through, again, I'll use the example kind of in grain production, because that's where the spaces that Verge has played in, and where a lot of my scar tissue comes from. But the sales agronomist is already inundated with, first off, the products they're actually in the business of selling, like chemical and fertilizer and agronomic advice, as well as all of these secondary products. And so there's limited space, gray matter for them to allocate to this, which is totally fair. And so, you can only get kind of so much attention. And if you're not really moving the needle, and if it's not really a good fit, you're kind of trying to go square peg round hole, it might not be the right move. So, the other thing is, just because everybody else did the channel, or just because everybody else went direct, that doesn't mean that's the solution here. Kind of look at it again, back to, who is the customer? Is your, grain tool, is it really chasing the farmer? Maybe it's chasing actually the elevators, or the grain buyers, for example, or maybe it's actually a fintech tool that we should be looking at kind of the finance side of the equation. There's lots of different ways to go at it.
Yeah, so the term scar tissue, that's spoken like a true veteran in the industry. I had to write it down. It's a great way to describe all of the different pains, and it summarizes it all too well. I'm hearing, make sure that we challenge the status quo with this stuff, right? Don't just fall into a groove. And the way we've always done it is maybe, that's one of the most dangerous statements in all of business. And we should always be challenging and re-challenging our approaches and making sure that they still work today for the people that we're targeting and for today's industry. And in ag tech, I think we're finding that it's moving at such a rapid speed that next year it could look completely different than it does from this year. And if we don't keep up and modify, and we'll go stale way too fast. At IntraGrain, we take a slightly different approach. We've got the dealer network, and we found that works for us, again, from understanding our customers, because it's such a, again, going back to the relationships and the local trust and making sure that there's the opportunity for high touch points. We found that the dealer network supports that much better than we ever could. I'd need to have a team of hundreds of or thousands of people fielding calls and handling those handshakes. And for us, it doesn't work for us. And we found the dealer network is the approach. But definitely, it's really interesting to see how similar problems or similar approaches can take completely different, can look quite different. So no, I appreciate that. Kim, do you have anything that you'd like to put into that conversation? You've got some content to toss our way.
Sure. I think I would add, I think Wilson made some excellent points. The focus on your customer is so critical, but I think understanding where your value is created, that's really an important exploration for any technology to look at. And it may surprise you. And you generally learn about that by really getting out there with a customer who's using the technology or, putting it to work to solve a problem. I think of one of the early startups that I worked with that, they were making a product that producers applied to their crop, and it had interesting, value to the producer. But when they really dug in, what they saw is they were influencing the perishability of their final product. And that created value up the chain at the retail grocer. And so they started focusing on the retail grocer as a means to pull that technology along, and just saw, an amazing acceleration. So I think getting down into the weeds of understanding your customer is going to give you some clues about your best path to market. And it, as you said, it might be the channel, it might not, it might be, somewhere along the channel that you weren't originally thinking about.
Yeah, focus on that value, right? That's where is the value, and focus on it heavily.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Kim, like that, because it gets back to like, really, who is your customer? We think it is there's a default, I feel like, oh, it's the farmer, or oh, it's the agronomist, or whatever. And lots of times it isn't. And as we all know, as everyone else, who's kind of listening knows, ag is a huge matzo ball of a sector. And there's lots of different kind of ways to come at it. And kind of the fully upstream part at primary production is only part of it. And there's so many places up and down that make a lot of sense. And the whole purpose of half of these businesses, or most of them, is to kind of push the status quo, try and change it in order to make it better. So it's a little bit counterintuitive that often we're not prepared to do that in our own businesses, but that's actually the whole foundation of the business.
Wilson, Kim, you guys are making me really question a lot of stuff here. We're digging deep into this, which is great. I love it. So Kim, I'm gonna put one your way that's kind of directed at your area of expertise and more specifically your experience. I want to talk. We've spoken about differences between ag tech and everything else. Now, I want to talk about how big businesses can work together with smaller businesses and startups. So, for you, how do you see large corporations and ag tech startups or smaller ag tech businesses most effectively working together? How do we make corporations play in this space, and really what can founders do to best optimize or utilize those relationships?
Sure. Well, it's an interesting dynamic. The first reaction most people have is, well, obviously the big strategics can be the channel, or they can be the money, and those are things that that strategic companies can bring to any startup. But I encourage founders to not, first of all, to choose carefully, right? I mean, you sort of want to go to the biggest, and sometimes that's the best play. But more importantly than size is, is their vision or their mission aligned with what you want to achieve? So, I mean, when we try to enter into a relationship, we're really trying to look for, is there a win-win here for both parties? That sounds really trite, but we really do try to focus on, is this going to bring something to our business? And conversely, what does it bring to the startup other than the super obvious things of cash and market reach? So we really try to dig in, can we effectively move this technology? Does it align with our strategy? And are we in alignment with the way that the startup wants to approach the market? So I think that's vetting your partners is a very important thing to do. And I think recognizing what everybody brings to the party. I mean, I think startup founders sometimes forget that in addition to money and size, there are all kinds of resources in big companies. There are legal resources, regulatory resources, supply chain resources, all kinds of subject matter experts that can be very helpful to your business. And if you really have a strong partnership, those things can be very, effective for a big company startup kind of relationship. But you have to sort of tease those things out, and you have to approach it with a win-win for everybody. If you're going into this, I just need your money and your market access, and we'll handle the rest, that's probably not the right attitude. It's really trying to think about the wins from both sides.
Yeah, again, it's the focus on the value, right, from both sides. And I love hearing you talk about it from the perspective of the founder, or from the perspective of the company. I'm sure that those interactions, those relationships, and those they can probably seem really scary for the founders when you're getting involved with a company that's so big it can appear as though maybe it's a steamroller. So I'm sure, Kim, having somebody like you on the side, maybe maybe steamroller is the wrong term, but having you on the side of the steamroller is probably very comforting for those founders because they know that they've got somebody in their corner. Yeah, no, I love that focus on value. That's fantastic. If you, I gotta ask, if you, out of all of the companies that you've assisted, all of the situations you've been involved in, what's the heaviest hitting opportunity? Like, what is the highest value point that you've seen in terms of those relationships between the big company and the small company? What's the easiest win or the fastest win for those relationships? What should people be looking for if they don't know, if they've never been involved in those types of interactions?
Yeah, again, I think and you actually made an interesting point about the steamroller. I mean, one of the things I manage within Mosaic is that we can be kind of overwhelming to a startup. I mean, even things like starting with a basic NDA or we can come at you with our, full force legal team and it feels a little scary. So we try to tone those things down a little bit and try to be a little bit more, but understand that our risk profile is so much different. So you have to be a little patient with the bigger companies and that they are managing a lot of risk, a lot of different forces against these things that, as a small company, you just don't have to deal with. So be patient with that. But I think, really, again, just vetting that it's the right partner, that both of you are aligned towards a common goal, that you know what you both want to achieve, and it's not one-sided. It's, really about moving your business as a founder forward and obviously for the big company moving their business forward. So making sure you start with that alignment. And once you start with that alignment, things generally tend to flow. You're going to have bumps in the way. You're going to probably, even like any partnership, you're going to have some disagreements or some hiccups, and you got to be able to work through those too. But, it is really vetting that true partner and, not just thinking about cash and access.
Awesome. Yeah, Wilson, I got to throw it your way. I know that there's been some, you're a self-proclaimed serial entrepreneur. You've been involved in that world with a couple of successful exits. So talk about alignment. I'd love to hear what you're looking for when you're talking to big companies, and maybe from a slightly different perspective, because if we're dealing with startups, some of them are looking to, integrate, and some of them are looking for exits.
Yeah, like Kim's point's bang on about the alignment, and you have to understand where the win is on both sides. And not only just you have to understand it, but you have to be able to articulate it for the other side, what the win is for them. And in a very kind of I call it breadcrumb kind of a way, it's very clear, it's very logical, everyone can kind of see it and get along with it. And I think the last point that Kim brought up around patience, I know, at least for me, and I think it's a common trait as amongst entrepreneurs, man, that's the hard one, because you're used to, as a small company, and you're trying to get going, you get all this excitement and you're super jazzed about whatever it is that you're doing, you're taking over the world. And so like, you just come to everything with such adrenaline and you're moving fast and you're used to it, and this doesn't work, throw it out, let's figure something else out. And then you hook on with the steamroller, and I'm going to keep building on the analogy, because the steamrollers are super effective at what they do, but they are not known for going fast. Like that's what they are. That's just what they're built for. And so you have to be okay with that, because otherwise you could have the best alignment, you could have the best plan and everything, and you'll blow yourself up because you're trying to turn the steamroller into a whatever, a race car. And it just isn't going to happen. And so there's you have to think about that. And this is a dance, and you have to go through that process and build that alignment and make it crystal clear and be okay with this is going to take time, and it's going to take a bunch of meetings, and it's going to feel repetitive. But that's how process and organization works, and that's how the risk gets managed in a big organization. That you don't get to be Mosaic or Bayer, Syngenta, et cetera, by just shooting from the hip and making stuff up and seeing what happens. Like those two models don't work. And so kind of coming at it with that mindset of, super clear, here it is, because again, typically, they're coming at it from a mindset of John Deere, like, this is what we do, we paint stuff green. And so, this is what it is. And so they need you to help kind of, no, but this is how things being painted green works with, whatever it is you're talking about, and take the time, build the relationships, you need more than just one kind of champion within a Mosaic or a Deere or whomever. It's multi-threaded selling. You have to kind of build relationships, get a couple of champions with you. That all takes time. It all takes patience. But in my experience, and it doesn't mean I'm right, but in my experience, that's how you start to kind of get the steamroller heading in the direction that you're hoping it will, and you actually get to cling on to the side of it, which is ultimately what you're trying to achieve.
That's awesome. I love the visuals I'm getting from this. I got Kim driving a steamroller, Wilson hanging on to the side of it, and somehow it's turning into a race car. I love it. I love it, yeah. You guys. So all of that's really, I appreciate the actionable information in those comments, right? Because I mean, with Cali and our parent company, we're always trying to get ourselves into ag tech in a bigger way. And kind of what we find is that you really have to define the value and work with the founders, work with the startups, or work with the already established companies to find out exactly what they're looking for. Nobody wants to be pushed. Wilson, to your comment, founders move fast. And so you got to do your best to run beside them, but then try and understand where their destination lies and see if you can help them get to it. Sometimes that's through acquisition, and that's a certain approach. Sometimes it's just through giving them the superpowered capabilities that a big corporation has. But again, I think the biggest thing that I'm taking out of these comments is that every big company needs a Kim, because Kim gets it and she can help them out. So
that's right. Kim acts like a translator, and there's often, in today's world, especially in ag, there's always a Kim. I found there's somebody who gets it on both sides, and so you need to find Kim, and then listen to Kim when Kim says it's okay. We're going to get back to you in 3 weeks, and you say, I only need a yes or no. Yeah, but that's going to take 3 weeks.
Just trust in Kim. I like it. That's good advice. So I got 2 questions left, and we're running out of time. This conversation has been flowing so nicely that I don't think we're going to even get through all of our content. But we've talked about the differences with ag tech. We've talked about how do we work together. And the last thing I want to talk about is the unfair advantage that we find in Saskatchewan right now. I mean, there's a bunch of stats that everybody throws around when it comes to this question. There's 44% of Canada's arable farmland, which accounts for, my notes say, like over 60 million acres. But I really want to drill into quickly, as quickly as we can, the unfair advantage that we feel Saskatchewan has right now. I'll start this one off really quick. I mean, if anybody has ever watched one episode of the Prairie Farm Report, you fully understand the Saskatchewan-based advantage right there. I mean, we can do anything with nothing. So imagine what we're going to be capable of with like unlimited opportunities or options in front of us. So I think, Kim, let's throw it your way. What do you see as the unfair advantage for Saskatchewan, I guess?
Yeah, it is that entrepreneurial spirit, right? Like you just the whole region seems to be just ready to go for it, right? nothing's gonna stop the momentum up there. And I think that spirit of wanting to try new things, I think it's very different than other regions of the world. And you have size and scale that are important for a lot of these technologies. And so I think there's a number of things that just make the region such an attractive area to focus on.
Awesome. Thanks, Kim. Wilson, what's your take on
it? Yeah, I agree. Like at its core, there's it's at a DNA level in Saskatchewan and other parts of Western Canada, this kind of pull yourself up and something out of nothing. I love the Prairie Farm Report reference. I was thinking about that the other day. Almost never got to watch it, but all you really wanted to see, like all the other stuff didn't matter. It was like the last 3 minutes about somebody who like found an old burnt up combine and somehow turned it into like a greenhouse and did it all with like 3 pieces of duct tape and a shoelace. And it was just always the best to see, what people cooked up. But it's exactly that. Like, how can we keep pushing it forward? How can we keep pushing the boundaries? Western Canada, Saskatchewan in particular, has a huge history of innovating in technology in agriculture. It's just we didn't think about it as technology at the time. But no-till, cropping and minimum till, like a lot of that stuff came out of the prairies as a matter of necessity. The air drill, the air seeder, that came out of Saskatchewan as a matter of necessity. Like, all of these things you just kind of keep building up, and so this is a natural progression and evolution, and we're known around the world for it. The other thing that I would add is, all of the cool stuff, or at least a lot of the cool stuff that's happening kind of from a macro sense, Saskatchewan's really well positioned for. I was at a conference speaking in New York about agriculture and kind of what was happening. And one of the big topics was the global protein shortage, which a lot of customers or consumers don't really know about or much care, but that's giving the rise to all these alternative proteins and plant-based foods and a bunch of stuff. Is how do we kind of change the basket, the grocery basket, so to speak, and feed the world that A, needs more protein, and B, has less of it from traditional sources. And I was there, and I made this joke because they were showcasing the Impossible Meat burgers as part of the buffet, and I'm like, yeah, it's a Saskatchewan burger. Like, it's peas, lentils, canola oil, and salt all spun into a blender. Well, who's the world leader at peas, lentils, canola, and salt? It's as I joke, it's the Lord's rectangle, right smack dab in the prairies. And that's, there's your unfair advantage, and we can just keep hitting it.
Wilson, I've got just notes of the Wilson one-liners from today. The Lord's rectangle, scar tissue, I like it, clinging on to a steamroller. Yeah, I agree, you guys. That's really well stated. I'm going to get one last question, and I'm actually going to take some of Wilson's advice on this. The last question that we've seen today has most typically been, what is everybody's book recommendation? But I am going to avoid falling into that channel, and we're going to take it slightly different. We're going to do a billboard question. This one is, you always hear it on the Tim Ferriss podcast, and we'll see how it goes. It's a one-liner. If you had access to one billboard in a city center and you could put whatever you want on it, but it couldn't be advertising for your company or anything pushing your products, what would you put on it? What would you want your name attached to? And so for me, this is unfair for me, but this is the privilege I get as the moderator today. I would put on it, I've been asked this question, and mine would be that you would want to talk less, listen more. And I think that today really dives into our concept of identifying and finding the value for everybody. But talk less, listen more is what I would put on my billboard. So Wilson, I'm going to throw it your way. Kim, you get a little bit extra time to think about it. Wilson, you're on the spot. What would you put on your billboard?
You always get to where you're going by taking the high road.
Ooh. Okay, I'm going to steal that from another one. I'm going to write that down. Okay, Kim, what would you put?
This is like true in life. It always takes twice as long and twice as much money. So plan ahead.
Awesome. Awesome, you guys. Those are all really good pieces of advice. Amy, what would you put on your billboard?
Oh, this is my favorite quote that I love to have. It's my dad has always instilled it in me. And it is, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And that's not true, because we all work sometimes, but it's just the reassuring the fact that you have to have passion for what you do. And I think we were proved here today that the three of you do. So that's amazing. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you. Amazing job, Tanner, Kim, and Wilson. I'll now be using Find Yourself a Kim and the Lord's Rectangle as day-to-day mantras in my life. But truly, thank you so much. What a fantastic conversation on everything from grassroots ag connections to what you guys see coming down the pipeline in terms of ag tech innovation. Also, love to see the common factor that you all are hailing from towns under 300 in population. Even Kim down there in was it Illinois? Kim, did you say? Indiana. I struggle with the states, very different places. But I think it's definitely safe to say that the future of ag tech is bright, not only in Canada, but right here in Saskatchewan, because as Tanner mentioned, we can truly do anything with nothing. So thank you so much to everyone in the audience. Please be sure to head back to the main Friday track to catch the rest of the Sask Startup Summit action. And with that, we will bid you adieu and have a fantastic day, everybody.
Thanks so much, you guys.
Take care.